The moon was tired of being in the sky, turning endlessly around one rock, watching the rock's inhabitants from afar. It liked humans, but they had only ever visited it once before, tickling dusty flesh before leaving. The moon should visit them again. It had been a while. Condensing its identity, the moon assumed its human self, and fell. The cold vacuum of space filled its rusted lungs, cleaning them out. It had been a long night's watch, but the moon had yet to grow tired. It couldn't get tired. It simply got bored on occasion. His sister would be glad to see him walking among her people again. He pulled himself towards the threads of gravity, flickering from his sister. Grasping a line, the moon descended towards his sibling at an alarming rate. The moon's world became a ball of fire as he descended. Thinking of cold, the moon landed in a puff of steam and white fluff. Sitting up, he looked around himself. The moon breathed easily. Snow everywhere. Barren trees and a large pond to the north that glittered like diamonds with the brilliance of the stars. Shifting his form, the moon walked towards the lake, mesmerized by the beauty of it. Kneeling by the pool, the moon touched the icy surface. Cold flowed into him. Jerking his hand away, the moon collapsed into the soft snow behind him. The heat from his butt radiated onto the snow. Reaching into the cold that had taken residence in his heart, the moon plucked it from him, began to shape it. A dark blue shirt formed before him. Reaching into the moisture around his butt, the moon created a pair of black cotton-like pants. Slipping on the pants and buttoning on the shirt, the moon smiled and stood up. Humans are fascinating. The moon loved clothes. So warm. The brush of cloth against skin brought an interesting hodgepodge of sensations. That of being held, that of warmth, comfort, and safety, and that of restraint. Smiling, the moon looked up at the sky. Judging by the position of the stars, he had 2 more hours before the sun appeared. He wouldn't really like it if she saw him here. He had to find a disguise before then. Standing, the moon meandered towards the forest, hands outstretched, collecting a variety of substances from the ground and air. A warm breeze from the passing of a body, the rock-hard stability of the ground. Reaching the tree, the moon passed these things into one hand and pressed it into the shadows of the tree's root. The tree whispered in gratitude at the gift, and began extracting existence from it, releasing shadows as waste. Collecting each shadow as it passed into the snow around the tree, the moon weaved the cold into something. Cold, warmth, loneliness, all formed into one singular point in space and time, elongating the point into something resembling a cloak. The moon threw it over his shoulders, testing the fit. A light gray shadow settled onto him, a cool breeze accompanying it, radiating into the moon like the vast, cold emptiness of space. With the comfortable feeling of home on his shoulders, the moon left the little clearing behind. He had humans to find. Metal horses? The moon stared, safely hidden under a tree at the contraptions as they zoomed by on solid ground harder than rock. Solid ground. Concrete? What had happened to the dirt? The moon liked dirt. It helped him get closer to his sister. He could not feel Gaia on this new stone without straining his senses. Everything was more gray now. Literally. The lovely blue sky was clouded by a layer of pulverized and burned rock. The buildings were gray, with glass embedded into them. Humans seemed to have discovered bones of dinosaurs, and were burning them, always burning. Were they angry? Were these the new gods that humans worshipped? Why were they so hungry? Or did humanity wish to become like the sun, ever burning, heating the solar system? Whatever they were doing, it seemed to have changed the contents of the air. It was interesting. He shrugged as he looked at the humans. Their long swishing cloaks had been traded for short, battle-hardened jackets. Why? What was wrong with cloaks? The moon was slightly pleased by the wide-brimmed hats everyone had decided to wear. It would help him hide from the sun. The moon was slightly pleased by the wide-brimmed hats that everyone had decided to wear. It would help him hide from the sun. Moving deeper into the shadows of the tree he hid behind, the moon took off his cloak and began to rearrange it. He removed the hood, folded it to make a hat, and smacked it against the tree, solidifying it. The dark hood was now a large-brimmed hat. Stylish, right? He put it on his head and started to fold his cloak into a jacket. He pulled it on, staring at it. Interesting. Looking closely at the jacket, he noticed little stars were glistening along the jacket's sleeves. Where did you guys come from? Bemused, the moon shrugged. It felt nice on his shoulders, as cool as his cloak had been, but more heavy, like a large dusting of comet tears settling on his surface. Looking up carefully, the moon watched the burning ball of gas as she moved her way over the height of the tallest buildings, turning her fire gaze into the city. He should have moved faster earlier, while the sun was watching a different part of the city. Tilting his head down, the moon moved forward, joining the crowd. He passed by clothing stores and looked at the new fashions. The moon compared his clothing to the ones worn by the Foss people. It wasn't a bad copy for his first time in this century. Maybe he could have shortened the hem a bit and tightened his chest, but it would do. The moon walked on. He smiled at those he passed. Someone smiled back, a half smile, more grimace than actual joy. Others looked away and down. This troubled the moon. Last time he had been to Earth, everyone nodded to each other and smiled. It had been a small sign of the great society. It had been a small sign of the great social order that humanity was creating. All were equal. All could do anything if they only put their minds to it. What had been happening here? The moon tried to remember where the library had been. He was in desperate need of a history lesson. Believing he remembered, the moon's feet began to turn north. Shortly after noon, the moon had not found the library. Someone had moved it, and no sign said where it had gone. None of the buildings whispered about books. The trees remembered some, but had not seen them for several hundred years. The wind had not rustled paper in some time, and the iron chariots had never known such things could exist. It wondered if books would burn. The moon kept his conversation with the cart short after this. Books should not be burned. Resigning himself to ask one of the persnickety humans, the moon did his best to put on a congenial face, peeking up at the sun to ensure that she wasn't watching him directly. The moon watched her gaze for a moment. She was watching everyone. Good. Lowering his head, he began to smile and nod at people, trying to find someone who would be willing to talk. As the sun's heat began to beat down on him, the moon began to worry about her finding him. Would she remember his voice? It had been a while since she had heard it. Maybe she would be more tired since she was starting to set on this side of the world, and wouldn't notice him speak to a human. Did she remember the taste of his soul? He remembered the taste of hers. Warm, nearly scalding, yet soothing, willing to comfort a cold, lonely soul. She wouldn't remember him. It had been too long. Shaking his head, the moon turned his attention towards the humans, listening to some speak curtly to each other. The moon absorbed the new syllables, memorizing how they combined to form words. As he listened, the moon noticed that there were 3 common languages spoken among the humans, all on just one street. How fascinating. The moon danced through the streets, feeling the languages on his tongue ready to jettison forth from him. He walked up to a passing person and spoke. "Hello, I was wondering where the library is." The human looked at them oddly and said, I'm sorry, sir. I don't speak Greek, just English." "Right, one language per person, it seemed." The human was looking at the moon like it should know this. The moon switched languages. "I'm sorry, I'm new to town." The moon grinned at the human. The man lifted one side of their face in sympathy. I was just wanted to know where the library was. It's not where it used to be when I visited last." The human looked puzzled. "Library?" Their tongue held on to the middle of the word, gripping it by the nape of his neck, examining it. "What is a library?" The moon's confidence faltered. It's a place where people donate books to the public, and the public can borrow them, and return them when they are done." The human's face became a frown. "Are you still speaking Greek? I don't know what a book, a library, or what reading is." "Seriously?" The moon knew he was still speaking English. This man simply did not know what these words meant. "How does your society maintain itself without reading?" The man shrugged. "I don't know. We just go on." The man began to edge away from the moon. "I'm sorry, sir, but I must be going. I have a meeting at work." The man scampered away from the moon. Whoa. No library, no books, no reading. The moon looked up at the signs he had noticed earlier. They were pictures. So a return to hieroglyphs? How had this happened? Who had the ability to read still? Someone had to, otherwise these new iron horses would not be around. Nothing could be moving so fast without efficient communication. The moon walked down the street until he reached an alley. Walking down it, he sat on a box and tried to figure out what was going on. absorbing the darkness as a source of energy. Humans were its favorite thing to watch. Riding was the humans' key to success. They would never have been able to remember past a generation or two without it. They could not have unified lands, taxed farmers, bureaucracies were reliant upon writing. The system humans were still using screamed of bureaucracy, yet reading was not a thing anymore. What had happened? Why? Fading into the darkness of the world, the moon traveled to his sister's surface in an instant, glimpsing into each and every shadow of the world. Returning to the alleyway, panting, the moon felt ice form in his stomach. Every continent he had visited was the same. None knew what reading or writing was. He had extemporized, he had gesticulated. The moon had tried everything. He had even created paper ones and carried it over to 3 continents. None had recognized what it was, but someone had to be keeping track of everything, and someone had to be teaching these people. So who? Did the moon really care? If knowledge was kept to the few, told others, then why should he care? Did anyone really still know how to read? Was the past still taught, or were humans simply moving forward? Why did the moon even care? These insects were small and insignificant, yet he longed to interfere. He wanted the humans to understand the beauty of their past, remember, read tales of those before, create new things. He wanted them to long for past sorrows, loves, blunders, simpler times that weren't really there. Humans needed these things. Without them, they were just like the great ones, always moving forward. He could not interfere, though. Only use it. Despite the pain in his chest, he could not interfere. That was what all the great ones had agreed with when the universe was created. They could travel the universe and create creatures, but they could not deliberately help the creatures become more. He could have made all humanity into little moons for other civilizations if he wanted to, but he did not. He was a good moon. He obeyed the contract, yet he wanted to help all humans tell their stories. The fluttering in his chest like a cage of sparrows pushed the moon to break his contract. Was it worth all his morals, though? No. They had to fight to reclaim their superiority. Humanity had to remember on their own. They had to. He walked out of the alley and was hit by a passing pedestrian. The moon tripped and watched as his hat flew off his head and into the street. It was immediately crushed back into shadow by a car. Well, stars and gas giants. That's not good. The moon looked at the sun. It was setting and would be gone within the hour. He turned his back on it and joined the crowd. He thought loudly, just another human, hoping that the sun hadn't noticed him, forcing its attention away from him with his will. The air around the moon began to sizzle. Tulips and honeydew. She had noticed him. The sun dimmed momentarily as the sun's consciousness joined humanity. The moon crossed the street, spotting a park across from him. He ran into the park and vanished into the cool shadows of a tree. The moon made the shadows grow, darkening them. He waited. The moon's body was on the other side of the globe still. The moon could not return to it until it was on this side of the planet. He couldn't teleport there with the sun and Gaia. She would be watching for his magic and wouldn't interfere if he did. The park sighed as it felt the sun's arrival. Flowers sprouted from trees, and the ground as nature welcomed the bringer of life. All things lived in her presence, no matter how dead. Sometimes that was a problem. The moon looked around. Nothing too large was buried in this park. A few skeletal squirrels and rabbits were digging themselves free from the soil. The moon peeked from the shadows towards footsteps as he heard her approach. He couldn't resist. There she was in all her splendor. Beautiful blonde, fair hair floating behind her as she floated through space and time. Yellow, sparkling skin tinted with a slight orange. Fiery eyes exploring the world, hunting for him. She had crafted herself a forest green dress in typical fashion. It had flowers embroidered into it. Simple, unique, and beautiful. The moon's heart ached as he looked at her, longing for her. He had forgotten how beautiful she was. Digging his fingers into the earth helped remind the moon that he could not run into her embrace. He had given her up to be with humanity. Couldn't he abandon them now, though? They were becoming more like insects, efficient workers, but uncreative. Boring. She would never be boring. Entities like them were eternal. They only ever changed slightly, and only under extreme circumstances. The sun turned towards him. Her eyes pierced the shadows, and she smiled. It was a mischievous, vicious, victorious smile. The hunt was over, and she had won. Hello, my love. Her voice was warm, loving, enticing, drawing all living things towards it. The moon couldn't help himself. He stood, abandoning the shadows. He flitted towards them. He flittered towards his lover's embrace. They clutched at each other. Winter and summer met, forming autumn and spring simultaneously in one moment, both ending everything only to begin it again. Forgive, renewal, rebirth, the coming, death, the end. All of this in one embrace, merging together to form two perfect diamond-like water droplets on both of the entities' faces. The two danced into the air, abandoning human to its fate. They danced in the sky. They danced beyond, becoming new constellations as they zoomed this way and that, reacquainting after millennia of separation. The earth rumbled, in fear as its surface began to cool. The moon had been with her for so long. Why was it leaving? How could it leave her? His sister. Did they not have something special? The humans? What had gone wrong with them? She had made them to keep her sibling close. He had stayed. It had been enough, kind of. All life on the green rock died as she whipped her consciousness from the planet and followed the moon and the sun as they flew through the vast eternity of space.